It's the 1950s in America. A young boy sits eagerly in the living room, eyes wide in anticipation as he waits for his birthday gift. His parents smile proudly as the little guy tears away the brown wrapping paper. Is it a jigsaw? How about one of those fancy new pogo sticks everyone's talking about? Nope, it's a box containing 4 pieces of radioactive uranium ore. More specifically, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab Kit, a real toy that hit U.S. store shelves. Perfect for the little Oppenheimers out there. Not interested in building your own miniature weapon of mass destruction? No problem. Why not play hide and seek with a gamma ray source? Just grab your Geiger counter and off you go. Fun for the whole family. And that's just the tip of the iceberg on today's episode of the Infographic Show. We'll be looking at toys that were banned or restricted for being dangerous, scandalous, or downright deadly. And for all you know, one of them might be in your home right now. Number 22. CSI Forensics Lab Fingerprinting Kit. Kicking things off with a toy that one of the Infographic Show writers may have actually owned. The 2007 CSI Forensics Lab Fingerprinting Kit. A tie-in to the hugely popular TV show, this toy promised to let kids collect fingerprints just like a real forensic specialist. But it may have actually just been giving them lung cancer. That's because the fingerprinting dust inside of the kit was made of 7% tremolite, one of the deadliest forms of asbestos that wreaks havoc on people's lungs later in life. While the China-based manufacturer claimed that the fingerprinting dust passed their own asbestos tests, the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization disagreed. Shame that we don't have a non-carcinogenic fingerprint kit to help us find out who the real culprits are. Our next nostalgic toy of terror is from the mid-90s and sent worried parents into a spin. Number 21. Sky Dancers. For anyone unfamiliar with Sky Dancers, imagine Beyblades but in the air. These toys featured a fairy with foam wings attached to a base with a ripcord. You pull the cord, and the Sky Dancer would spin and launch into the air, to the delight of all involved. At least in theory. In reality, they often crashed into faces, eyes, and anything unlucky enough to be in their flight path. First released by the toy company Louis Galoob Toys, Inc. for the Christmas season in 1994, these adorable little fairies flew right off the shelves and right into the eyes of the children they were bought for. Seriously, despite the popularity of Sky Dancers, these things were dangerous, causing a reported 150 severe injuries in at least one darkly hilarious viral video where it flew straight into a roaring fireplace. Despite the wings being made out of a soft material, Sky Dancers sliced and diced the faces of way too many children on Christmas morning. In lawsuits against Galoob, there were reports of temporary blindness suffered by Sky Dancer victims, and even wounds that required stitches. It got so bad that in the year 2000, an eye-watering 9 million of the menaces were recalled for the safety of the fairy-loving kids everywhere. Let's stay in the air for our next, even more dangerous toy. Number 20. Sky Rangers Plane. The remote-controlled Sky Rangers plane brought joy to thousands of kids until it literally exploded in their faces. That's right, back in 2007, 21,000 of these toys were recalled because their batteries had a tendency to blow up if overcharged. This unfortunate design flaw made them the world's most unintentionally realistic kamikaze replica toys. The batteries were liable to enter the danger zone if they were charged for over 3 minutes, an easy mistake to make despite the warning on the box. These explosions thankfully weren't fatal, but they did cause severe shrapnel wounds to the kids' eyes, ears, and chests. The moral of this? Between Sky Dancers and Sky Rangers, you really shouldn't trust any toy that has the word Sky in the name. Fun fact, 2007 was a really bad year to be a kid receiving toys, because that's also the year that we saw a major recall of our next entry. Number 19. Aquadots. Made by the Bendy's Company, Aquadots were little water-activated beads that empowered children through creativity to make their own fun designs. Oh, and it also roofied them. We may have buried the lead a little bit on that one. There were at least 2 reports of children consuming the Aquadots beads, which caused both severe breathing issues, seizures, and even presented the risk of sending the affected child into a coma. You might be wondering, how? Don't kids eat plastic all the time? We've probably all gotten a little monster movie villain on a Lego minifig at least once in our life. This presented more than just a choking and microplastics hazard for the kids who chowed down on Aquadots. A chemical called 1,4-butadiol was introduced during the manufacturing process. Once metabolized by the body, it became gamma-hydroxybutyrate, better known as GHB, a common but nonetheless perilous party drug that is popular among people who won't take no for an answer. After this disease came to light, there were bans and recalls in both the United States and Australia out of fear of the safety of children. This also resulted in a change to the Bindy's company's manufacturing process, where the dangerous 1,4-butanoediol chemical was replaced by the much more benign 1,5-pentanediol, after which those extremely unfortunate incidents thankfully ceased. Speaking of getting high, metaphorically speaking this time, there is another dangerous toy that offered just that. Number 18. Moon shoes. If you were a 90s kid dreaming of going straight to the moon, much like your weird uncle's favorite cryptocurrency, you might have begged your parents for a pair of Nickelodeon's official moon shoes. And if they caved, you probably ended up with more bruises than airtime and some serious trauma to your underaged ankles. And that's because those shoes, essentially mini trampolines for your feet, were notorious for causing sprains and even ankle fractures to their users. These so-called ankle annihilators were everywhere in the 1990s. They were marketed as everything from a fun way to exercise to a tool for kids with ADHD to burn off energy. But in reality, they were best at one thing: blowing out your ankles and sending you straight to the couch, groaning in pain, while everyone else kept having fun in your yard. Some claimed that moon shoes were responsible for thousands of injuries each year at the height of their lunar lunacy. As the controversy grew, the freaky footwear was banned but never recalled. So if you're feeling particularly masochistic, you could still hunt down a pair and take your chances. But the danger of a rolled ankle is nothing compared to how bizarre and lethal our next entry is. Number 17. Austin Magic Pistol. Let's hop into our terrifying toy time machine and head all the way back to 1940, when the Austin Magic Pistol, inspired by the then crazy popular Flash Gordon series, hit the shelves. Now you think the Nerf guns you had as a kid packed serious punch? They are nothing compared to this bright red disaster. The Austin Magic Pistol was designed to shoot out ping pong balls. So far so good, right? That hardly seems like a lethal projectile. The problem was how the toy fired its ping pong balls. A built-in chemical reaction between calcium carbide and water, which formed explosive acetylene gas that fired out flames and sparks, as well as that little white ball. But burns were just the beginning. If you got this gun wet, say you accidentally dropped it into a pool, or were even playing with it when it rained, it would just explode in your hands. If the Austin Magic Pistol was released today, its explosive ignition system would have it legally classified as a real firearm in multiple states and make it subject to all the same restrictions. Our next entry isn't just dangerous, it's downright creepy too. Number 16. Creepy Crawlers Creation Kit. We're talking about the infamous Creepy Crawlers Creation Kit, released by Mattel in 1964. And it features the patented Thing Maker. It was kinda like an easy bake oven, except it was for making weird bugs rather than cupcakes. The way the toy worked was simple. You poured colored slimes into a metal mold and then you heated them up inside the Thing Maker. Once the process was done, you would have made your very own creepy crawler. The whole thing was so popular that it even got spin-offs, like the weirdly named Creeple People and the Fighting Men, which, by the way, would be an excellent band name if anyone wanted to take it. There were two big problems, though. First, the metal creepy crawler mold rose to temperatures as high as 350 degrees Fahrenheit, causing horrible burns. And the second was that the chemicals that went into the creepy crawler molds released toxic vapors when heated up. It's a rare double threat, where both of them truly are threats. But it was still extremely popular. So despite its original incarnation being banned in 1978, it got a reboot in the 90s with all the dangerous stuff removed. But the Creepy Crawler kit was far from the only toy that caused chaos back in the 1960s. Number 15. Clackers. One of the more low-tech toys that still managed to cause plenty of chaos was the clackers, a toy that had one of the most baffling origin stories of any toy on this list. They were inspired by boleadoras, also known as bolas, tools used by Argentine cowboys to incapacitate animals. Whoever looked at that and thought, well, maybe that could also make a great toy for kids, was probably an extremely eccentric individual. And when we say clackers were low-tech, we mean really low-tech. It was two heavy balls made out of either wood, metal, or a heavy acrylic plaster connected by a piece of string. We're hardly talking about a Nintendo Switch here. The clackers were operated kind of like a tiny Newton's cradle, where the user would lift the string up and down, causing the two balls to clack against one another, producing a loud noise. Kids killed hours doing this back in the 60s because there was nothing else for kids to do back then. They were marketed as a way to help teach kids hand-eye coordination, which was a cruel irony because anyone who was playing specifically with the acrylic plaster version ran the risk of getting blinded. Why? Because if you clacked those together enough, they would literally explode, and fling tiny pieces of acrylic shrapnel in all directions. The problem was so widespread, it became one of the driving forces behind the FDA's overhaul of toy safety regulations in the 1970s, a move that set the US on a better path to making sure toys don't explode in children's faces anymore. But as this list proves, it sadly still very much happens. Number 14. Easy Bake Oven. We mentioned the iconic Easy Bake Oven earlier when we were talking about the Creepy Crawler kit. Well, it turns out that one of the things that the oven was really good at baking was children. A version released in 2006 had a design flaw that made it really easy for kids to trap their hands in the loading mechanism. This resulted in 77 burning incidents that put a serious stain on the cute miniature oven's reputation. In 2007, Hasbro issued a voluntary recall, offering parents either a refund or a free retrofit kit to modify these tiny hand death traps and make them safer to use. They also added a warning label to the packaging, advising children under age should not use the ovens without constant parental supervision, hoping that it would prevent more incidents like this. But surprise, it didn't. In fact, there was even a horrible case of a 5-year-old girl needing to have part of one of her fingers amputated after a severe burn from her Easy Bake. This led to a massive product recall, affecting almost 1 million ovens and tarnishing the brand forever, which all things considered is still a lot less bad than some poor kid losing part of her finger. Speaking of children experiencing severe burns. Number 13. Bat Masterson Derringer Belt Gun. Allow us to introduce you to the Bat Masterson Derringer Belt Gun, a spy toy that was essentially a cap gun attached to a child's belt. Normally it would point downward, but when the kid puffed up their stomach, the cap gun would spring up and fire in whatever direction the kid was facing. And look, we don't want to drag this out, but it's worth asking yourself, what do you think could go wrong with an explosive cap gun going off inches away from your family jewels? Yep, that doesn't paint a very pretty picture. The 1950s were a crazy time. After all this, you might be feeling a little exhausted. Who knew how many toys out there were absolute death traps, right? You might even be tempted to take a rest on that relaxing mini hammock over there. Number 12. Mini hammocks. That is until you find out that the mini hammocks have actually caused the deaths of at least 12 children. Yes, you heard that correctly. These things are extremely dangerous. These nylon mesh hammocks, produced by Easy Sales and Consolidated Stores, and sold for the low price of $3.99, seemed like normal hammocks for smaller customers. But they had one devastating design flaw. They lacked the spreader bars at each end that stopped the hammocks from closing in on the user, like a Venus flytrap. This meant that it was easy for someone lying in the hammock to become quickly wrapped up in it as it spun around and tightened, which was particularly dangerous for extremely young users. The 12 children aged 5 to 17 lost their lives after getting caught in the fabric, and even for those who made it out, the effects could be lasting. One survivor suffered permanent brain damage due to oxygen deprivation. 3 million of the pint-sized hammocks were recalled by 1995. The US government urged anyone who still owned them to destroy them immediately, or they could risk themselves or their family members becoming just another horrible statistic. Okay, that got really dark. Let's lighten it up a bit. Have you ever had that weird recurring nightmare where a doll devours you alive while it stares on with unblinking painted eyes? Oh, that's just us then? Number 11. Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids Doll. The nightmare became a reality for a lot of kids in the 90s when Mattel released the Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids Doll. This revolutionary piece of robotics had a motor behind its creepy rubber face that allowed it to endlessly chew as kids put plastic food into its mouth. The problem being that plastic food wasn't the only thing this devious doll loved to chew. Soon after the doll was released, there were multiple reports of kids getting their hair pulled out or having their tasty little fingers mangled by the doll's ever-gnashing maw. The situation was turned into a PR nightmare for the Cabbage Patch Kids brand. Things got so bad that Mattel voluntarily teamed up with the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission to launch a refund program, pulling over 500,000 units from shelves, all to keep the fingers and hair of America's kids safe. Chucky wishes he had this kind of reputation. Moving on, let's talk about how dangerous magnetic toys have been to children. Number 10. Buckyballs. Back in Christmas 2019, Olivia Faye from Australia had a holiday scare that no one saw coming. She accidentally swallowed 5 powerful magnetic balls, also known as Buckyballs, which were being sold as toys online. The result was a truly freaky X-ray where you can see the magnets in her body. These toys were actually already banned from Australian toy stores at the time, on the grounds that they're small enough to be swallowed individually, but would then snap back together to form a larger structure inside of the body. They presented a serious risk of creating blockages in a child's body that could lead to serious death or injury. And that's not even the most horrifying incident involving magnetic balls that occurred in Australia during that same Christmas. Somehow, an actual toddler had consumed 37 of those tiny terrors, which had to be surgically removed from the kid's stomach. These things are banned for a good reason, folks. Now on to another dangerous toy that, while nostalgic for some, resulted in a huge number of horrific injuries and at least one extremely tragic death. Number 9. Lawn darts. Lawn darts, also known as jarts, were basically mini spears for backyard fun. These 12-inch weighted darts were a staple of barbecues, garden parties, and long summer afternoons at the park. And just looking at them, it's easy to see why they could be a disaster waiting to happen, especially when beer got involved, which, let's be honest, it often did. Plenty of people ended up with these nasty little yard toys sticking out of their bodies. There were 6,100 incidents of them sending people to the ICU, 81% of which were kids younger than 15. But the most awful incident of all occurred in 1987 when a 7-year-old Michelle Snow became the first ever life to be taken by what seemed like just a game. When Michelle's father, aerospace engineer Michael Snow, first bought the lawn darts, he intended to just leave them in his garage. That was until his 9-year-old son and some of his friends found the darts, and they decided to play with them while Michelle was playing with dolls nearby. When one of the boys tossed a lawn dart, a sudden gust of wind sent it off course, and in a tragic twist, it came plummeting straight into Michelle's skull. She didn't stand a chance and was killed almost instantly. This changed her father's life forever, and he began campaigning to get the toys that killed his daughter off the shelves. Given that another little girl was put into a coma in a lawn dart accident the next year, these clustered tragedies led to the banning of lawn darts in December of 1998. However, when they were banned, they were never recalled, meaning plenty of these backyard hazards are still out there just waiting for another accident to happen. How about another blast from the past where toys cross over with the delicious world of candy and the ever-controversial candy cigarettes? Number 8. Candy cigarettes. First hitting the scene in 1915, these little white imitation cancer sticks have been a source of controversy for over a century. Parents and health groups have always despised them, yet they have been enjoyed by everyone, from the greatest generation to the elder Gen Z. However, they have since been banned by a huge number of countries, including Canada, the United Kingdom, Finland, Norway, Australia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Why? Because they promote tobacco culture to kids and they're believed to encourage smoking later in life. And with smoking-related illnesses causing nearly 500,000 deaths each year in the US, it's hard to argue that they aren't a potential risk to children's health down the line. It's also important to remember that dangerous toys aren't just a problem in the English-speaking world too. Number 7. Toothpick crossbows. Back in 2017, concerned Chinese parents got a new thing to be worried about when a particularly deranged toy craze started to take over local schools: toothpick crossbows. Yes, that is exactly what it sounds like. Tiny crossbows that fire out toothpicks up to a range of 66 feet in some cases. And naturally, kids being kids, plenty of these toothpicks have found their ways into the eyes of the crossbow wielders' classmates. The Chinese government has tried to crack down on what they call these evil-minded toys, but the sale of these tiny crossbows has still proliferated widely online. Some retailers advertise them as a great way to kill cockroaches, and given how hard cockroaches are to kill, that's a very good reason to be worried about any kids or pets around these dangerous weapons. All of these catastrophes might have you feeling wary about a lot of these toys. They might make you and your kids want to return to the basics with something as simple and danger-proof as a card game. Number 6. Hannah Montana Pop Star Card Game. The Hannah Montana Pop Star Card Game, featuring America's sweetheart circa 2009, Miley Cyrus, promised wholesome family fun. But what it didn't mention was the toxic bonus: lead poisoning. That's because this was one of the many vinyl-based products made in Chinese factories that contained what critics have called a dangerously high concentration of lead. Disney, however, has denied that any of their Hannah Montana products have been contaminated. To be fair to the Chinese factory inspectors who dropped the ball on this one, they may have been a little preoccupied trying to dodge all the toothpicks that their kids were firing at them out of those tiny crossbows at the time. Toys being full of dangerous concentrations of lead is sadly not even that uncommon. Back in 2017, during the all-consuming fidget spinner craze, popular American retailer Target needed to remove 2 different brands of fidget spinner that were pumped full of more lead than Bonnie and Clyde. But those are nothing compared to the much more immediate danger presented by our next killer toy. Number 5. Gilbert Glass Blowing Set. Remember at the start of the video when we told you about the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab Kit, the highly radioactive toy designed to teach kids how uranium mining works? It turns out that's not even the only deadly vocational set that Gilbert created back in the 50s. Meet the Gilbert Glass Blowing Set, where your kids can blow glass like a pro. These sets involve kids melting and molding molten glass that could reach a staggering 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which could burn a kid down to the bone if they handled it improperly, which many back in the day likely did. Seriously, the 50s were a different universe. Back to modern times. Remember hoverboards? Number 4. Hoverboards. These two-wheeled gizmos promise to make you look like a 1980s time traveler, but in reality, they mostly just made you look kind of ridiculous. And as it turns out, they could do a lot more damage to more than just your reputation. If you got the wrong one, you weren't just in for a rough ride. You were in danger of getting blown up and set on fire. And that's because some of the cheaper, more questionable hoverboard brands used the same notoriously unstable lithium-ion batteries that had Samsung phones going supernova in people's pockets. Once the full extent of the danger became clear, with viral videos of these self-balancing jerkmobiles spontaneously combusting, companies had no choice but to launch a massive refund, replace, and repair campaign, impacting over 500,000 units. Not every toy is banned because it's dangerous, though. Sometimes a toy gets yanked from the shelves because it's just in plain bad taste. Number 3. Steve the Tramp. This was the case for the ill-advised toy Steve the Tramp. Inspired by the Dick Tracy noir comic series, Steve the Tramp was a toy caricature of a homeless person which featured ad copy that claimed he was, quote, stinking up the city sewers, and also the phrase, ignorant bum, you smell him before you see him. And shockingly, this toy wasn't released in the 50s, it was released in the mid-90s as a way to promote Disney's live-action Dick Tracy movie. Probably unsurprisingly, Steve the Tramp drew ire from actual homeless people. It also drew criticism from people who thought it was just plain mean, and it taught kids the wrong message about people less fortunate than them. We honestly can't say we disagree. Now let's go from things that are in bad taste to things that taste bad. And it also might cause you serious harm or even death if you're unlucky enough to ingest them. Number 2. Monster Science Colossal Water Balls. We're talking about the Monster Science Colossal Water Balls, a name that would feel kind of weird and gross even if these things weren't actually dangerous. These toys were compact, multicolored balls that, when placed in water, along with the patented growth powder, would grow to 400 times their size into large foam monsters. In their dehydrated state, they also looked dangerously similar to gumballs, and deciding to swallow them, as many young children did, resulted in them entering a world of pain as the ball turned into monsters inside the children's bodies. And as if that wasn't bad enough, much like the buckyballs we mentioned earlier, these expanding foam monsters posed an even bigger problem. Unlike buckyballs, which at least showed up on x-rays, these things were completely invisible to doctors, making surgical removal a nightmare. And if all this still didn't seem horrible enough, the growth powder they came packaged with was toxic too. It was a straight flush of child endangerment all the way down, leading to 14,200 units in the USA and 1,200 units in Canada being recalled back in 2013. How about a toy that was so tragically effective that it killed people in real life? Number 1. Battlestar Galactica Missile Launcher. This is the dubious honor held by the Battlestar Galactica missile launcher toys first released by Mattel in 1978 as a response to the runaway popularity of the TV show. The most popular of these toys was the Cylon spaceship that fired an actual red plastic missile, which kids at the time thought was an incredible innovation in toy creation. The problem was the red missiles were just large enough that they would block the windpipe of a small child. After 3 such thankfully non-fatal incidents, Mattel decided to put a warning label about a choking hazard potentially presented by their Battlestar Galactica range. But tragedy still struck on Christmas Day 1978 when a 4-year-old named Robert Jeffrey Warren had one of those red missiles fired directly into his larynx, where it got stuck. He died on New Year's Eve as a result of his injuries. On January 11, 1979, the Consumer Product Safety Commission worked with Mattel to institute a recall on all of the missiles, agreeing to provide a free Hot Wheels car to everyone who sent theirs back. They also redesigned the Cylon ships to no longer fire real projectiles, eliminating the risk of anything like this happening in the future. Because of all the controversy, a rival toy company, Kenner, canceled the production of an official Boba Fett toy that fired a similar red missile from his jetpack. And the 1950s had their own equivalent with the somewhat racially insensitive Zulu blowgun, a blow-dart tube designed to fire out a small projectile when a kid blew air into it. The problem was, given that kids aren't always the most coordinated bunch, plenty of them sucked when they should have been blowing. As a result, they ended up choking when they sucked the projectile back into their throat. It got banned in the UK for being too dangerous, but it's still completely legal as a method of getting your kids to choke in the good old US of A. And that's what freedom tastes like, a plastic dart in the back of your throat. What's the most dangerous or ridiculous toy you remember from your childhood? Did you own any of the banned toys we covered in the video? Drop your stories in the comments below. Now check out You vs. Chucky. How can you defeat and survive it? Child's Play movie, or watch this instead.